Well, hello, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So, this week's blog is entitled How to Win Friends and Influence Students. And it's a direct result of a conference that I attended last week. I was out of state, and I was going to be speaking on Second Amendment jurisprudence, some underlying philosophical principles. It was a fairly high-level thing. Anyways, before I spoke, there was another trainer. Now, they own a training facility in this other location. And he had been a cop, was retired, and felt compelled to tell everyone that he, as a cop, knew more about the law than lawyers do. Now, insults not to be withstanding, in some respects, he very well might. And one of the things that I mentioned in the blog, a lot of times people assume that just because someone's a lawyer, they know every single facet of the law. This would be as completely ludicrous as going to someone who's a doctor that specializes in gastroenterology, focusing it on the stomach, and asking them about how to perform some sort of nuanced brain surgery or something like that. It's outside the scope of their practice. They may have some general understanding, but they tend to focus on one specific thing. I tend to focus on Second Amendment jurisprudence. Ask me a question about tax law, I'm not going to really have a good solid answer. And there are a lot of subject matter experts that are not lawyers. I would, in fact, in a lot of respects, probably like to hear from an accountant rather than an attorney as it relates to tax law. In any event, during his presentation, one of the audience members had asked, she's an elderly woman, had asked if, she keeps in her bedroom a fire extinguisher, ostensibly to prevent a fire, I guess, from happening. And if someone were to break into her home and she were to use the fire extinguisher to defend herself, would that be okay? He immediately jumped on her and said, absolutely not. If you use a fire extinguisher for anything other than putting out a fire, you're going to jail for violating a federal law. This is absolutely incorrect. It belies a fundamental misunderstanding of the doctrine of necessity or affirmative defenses in general. It's just, given the limited fact pattern that she had articulated, I really don't see a prosecution to begin with. Now, what it did do, though, is create, at least in her mind, an issue. And this issue could have potentially fatal consequences if someone were to break into her home and she had that briefest of moments of time to grab that fire extinguisher and use it to save her life. She may very well pause, thinking to herself, oh yeah, there was that random guy 3 years ago who told me that this is an illegal act. And that pause may ultimately be the source of her demise. Professionalism at arms is not just something that we try to impart on our students. It's also something that we have to embrace as trainers. If you as a trainer are not completely well versed in a particular subject, there is no harm in saying, I'm not particularly well versed in that subject. We'll have to research that. I might recommend you talk to someone else. I can provide you with that kind of information. Unilateralism breeds the arrogance of ignorance, and ignorance breeds bad policy. This was a quote from Arthur Schlesinger Jr. It was specifically designed to talk about how nation states interact with one another, but even on our little micro level here, it has merit. Anyways, I do encourage you to read the blog. As always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.